you were talking about the Minoans, right?
The Minoans, yes.
And yeah, so you were talking about the Minoans, and you were talking about how So basically, our conversation around is around feminism. You know, I want to talk about feminism and matriarchal societies or matriarchal civilizations. And I guess the question is, has there ever been civilizations that were predominantly run by a matriarchy, right? And this is not to like get into a debate, uh, from the point of the manosphere or anything like that, but it is, I think it is a constructive conversation because, um, you know, I think this is a deep seated question that societies that are matriarchal, do they have they ever existed, and do they, I think ultimately, do they survive,
Yeah.
right? And so you were talking about the Minoans, and yeah,
So just a little back history about the Minoans.
yeah,
A lot of people, whenever they're learning about Greek history,
mhm,
they, for whatever reason, they usually start off with the Minoans and the Mycenaeans.
okay,
The Mycenaeans were the kind of like the mainland Greeks,
okay,
like on the Peloponnese and everything.
hmm,
Uh, and then the Minoans were on the island of Crete.
right,
And a lot of the time, whenever people are learning about Minoans, they're learning about the big palace and temple structure at I think the old city, what was called Gnosis,
okay,
starting with a K. And
hmm,
it's really famous because there are still ruins there that are thousands and thousands of years old,
hmm,
and they still have remnants of colored murals of like
hmm,
dolphins and things like, and
yeah,
the colors are still vivid for being thousands and thousands of years old.
right,
And one of the things that archaeologists noticed very early on, whenever they began excavating the palace and the surrounding area, and they started seeing the imagery that were portrayed by the Minoans, was that that everybody was the same height,
okay,
or
mhm,
that gender did not play a role in people's size in the depiction in the murals.
okay,
Now, the typical thing that you usually see in a mural, especially going back that far, is the larger in size you are in the mural, the greater your status in society is. If
okay,
you're a king and a queen, then you're going to be the biggest stature people in the mural. And if you're depicting a god, then the
mhm,
god is going to be the biggest person depicted in the mural.
right,
But if you're looking, but typically in murals and artwork and things, the female is usually depicted as being shorter than the male. Not no,
mhm,
we're not talking significantly shorter, just
yeah,
marginally shorter typically.
mhm,
And that's a fairly universal, that's found universally.
okay,
So that was really interesting initially whenever they were doing the dig in the uh, uh, ruins on Crete, of
mhm,
the Minoan civilization. Anyway, they ended up doing a lot of research and everything to try to figure out, well, why is it that these that genders were depicted at the same height.
mhm,
And also too, typically, men have always been, you know the average man has always been taller than the average woman.
right,
And that's a pretty universal thing.
yeah,
um
not a
so
surprise, right?
no, 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 that's not shocking. You don't have to be Andrew Tate to believe that. So, but the thing that was really shocking was, that they discovered that the Minoan civilization, that they were very egalitarian at the very, very least.
Okay,
There are people that will argue that it became matriarchal,
mhm,
but that's not a solid argument.
mhm,
That's an argument that's posed based upon certain pieces of evidence.
right,
Now, the interesting thing is the Minoan civilization. It's kind of a rarity,
mhm,
because in most civilizations where you have material evidence that's intelligible,
Mm-hmm.
it's usually a patriarchal system, you know.
Mm-hmm.
So the Minoans are a little bit odd there.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and one thing that they ended up finding were lots and lots of mass graves of infants,
Wow.
and
Right.
it's really interesting that you know you do find infanticide in patriarchal societies. I'm not saying that, but
Mm-hmm.
um a lot of cautionary tales like the cautionary tale of the Amazons by the Greeks.
Mm-hmm.
People will refer to the Amazons as being a great civilization. Well, do you go back and you look at the original? If you go back and look at what the Greeks would say about the Amazons, is that it was chaos, and
Mm-hmm.
that that it was a cautionary tale as to why people would not want to live in a society like that when this
Right.
matriarchal.
Right.
Um,
Yeah.
so
And just talk, just going. I mean, just going on. Okay, let's. I think what's important to keep in mind is that the Minoan civilization does not exist anymore. You're right, and it.
right, and you see, and that's one of the problems is there really aren't any written records that we can read.
Right.
The what we know about it, it's what archaeologists have been able to piece together.
Right.
There
Right.
there is some documentation. I think the Mycenaeans wrote a little bit about it.
Okay.
But
Yeah.
there, it's people posing a bunch of arguments, but one kind of common consensus is that it was a very egalitarian
Right.
civilization, or at least it developed into one
Right. Right. And I
before it
think
collapsed.
right before it collapsed, and I think here what's important to what's also important is you know archaeologists and anthropologists and historians. I think some of them have tried to look for remnants of societies that were run by women, or
Mhm.
um, that were matriarchal, and places that they've argued for, like places in Africa were some places in Africa were matriarchal, right? Um, or like the females were at least warriors, or something like that.
Mhm.
And I remember one good case of this is that movie, that movie that was made about the warriors in Dahomey, um, in Benin, or no, yeah, in Benin, uh, that were like the king's guards were women, right? So
Mm.
they made the case that, oh well, the king, that the king had female warriors. So this is one of the places where where you had, like, this is maybe the place where the Amazonian warriors uh were, like in pre, in history or whatever, but I guess the real question is, why don't why don't we why don't we see matriarchal societies actually um, surviving? Why do they all tend to sort of, if they did exist, why do they all tend to die out, or why do they tend to go extinct? I guess that's the I guess that's the real question. Why do they go extinct?
That's the
You know?
multi-million-dollar question.
Yeah, right. How do they survive? And I guess the real my answer to that would be that societies that are run by matriarchies don't survive because women tend to have to take care of other duties, which is pretty much, they have to bear children, right? You go through 9 months of pregnancy. You're much more at risk for having to deal with attacks by other communities. If you're pregnant, or if you're rearing children, that doesn't leave you a lot of time to actually be going out to hunt, build things, create things, right? And create a cohesive society, you know.
Yeah.
So I think you can't really rely on females to be in the um, role of leadership because of that. There's just much more. There's much more at risk for them. You know what I mean? If they're having to, you know, sit somewhere and really nurture a child, for a number of years, even outside of the womb, right? Um, so yeah, I think building societies, it doesn't really lend itself to 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 that for women, you know.
Well, and why don't we back up a little bit and
Okay.
distinguish the difference between matrilineal
Hmm.
and matriarchal?
Okay. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. So a matriarchy is a society that is run or you know uh, that is orchestrated by women, right? But a but a but a matrilineal society is one that um, sort of the lineage of the children or whatever is carried through the mother, right? And so some people will allude to the Akan culture in Ghana, right? They say,
Mm.
well, that's a matrilineal society because the child, um, his lineage flows through the mother. They'll say, well, you belong to your mother's clan, or you know, um, you have the blood of your mother, right? But that doesn't mean that that society is run by women. Okay, a con, especially like with the Ashanti culture, which is part of the Akan culture, still has a king, right, and is run by the king, right. Um, the child will grow up, say, with the will be tutored by the mother's brother. You know what I'm saying? Not
Mhm.
the auntie. you know, uh, they have a they have a king, and then they have a queen mother. You see what I'm saying? But the
Mhm.
queen mother doesn't rule over the king. You see what I'm saying? So I think even when people are talking about, they make the case for matrilineal a matrilineal society, they they still, like, they forget to say that it's still run by men, right? The society is still run by men. Men are the chiefs. Men are the one that make the decisions. And so yeah, I think that distinction needs to be had, right?
Well, and I kind of think one of the reasons for the confusion
Mm-hmm,
that's so commonplace today between matrilineal and
mm-hmm,
matriarchal, and you can even see this in the teaching at universities,
mm-hmm,
where certain professors will use the two terms interchangeably.
mm-hmm,
And I think it's because in the postmodern paradigm that we're living in,
mm-hmm,
the only thing that's real to the person who adheres to a postmodern framework for understanding the world, they really believe the only thing that's real is power, and power
mm-hmm,
structures.
mm-hmm,
And they view everything at its core as being power structures and a victim victimizer relationship.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
So that's the only framework that they have to understand human relationships. That's the only framework that they have to understand real world things.
right.
That's why they're so obsessed with like in the world of politics, the only solution that they have for anything are tax policies,
Mm-hmm,
and using the government to impose things, is because that's rule by force, right,
mm-hmm,
and
mm-hmm,
power.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason that the postmodern that people that are postmodern in the way that the way that they view the world, which frankly a lot of us are,
Mm-hmm.
that's why they always gravitate toward power rather than looking at, okay, so what can I do in my life,
Mm-hmm.
or examine their own conscience and figure out, well, what am I doing? You
Yeah.
know, have I been kind to everyone I've encountered today?
Right.
You know,
Right.
that's totally that's a foreign line of reasoning for someone who's postmodern, because they're the only thing that they view as real is power. So for
Mm-hmm.
them, tracing lineage, that's an exercise of power.
Mm-hmm. Right. And so in the, I guess in the postmodern view, is it that they perceive that, well, all power lies with the man, and because all power lies with the man, we want to dismantle that? I mean, are they, do they see that as, they see the male female dynamic as a relationship of who really holds power, right?
Right.
I mean,
Well, what they argue is if you have a dynamic
mm-hmm.
of a man providing resources for his wife,
Mm-hmm.
and the wife is utilizing those resources in the service of homemaking, in the service of being the hearth of the family,
Mm-hmm.
of being the center of that universe,
Mm-hmm.
um of making decorating decisions,
Mm-hmm.
cooking decisions, and then also making decisions that involve, what language or languages are the children going to learn. That's a decision that mothers typically make.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And the simple fact is that it's when you really get down to the core of the apple, it's mothers that shape the future.
Yeah.
It's not fathers or men, really.
Right. 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 Right.
It's really mothers.
Right.
um
In respect to, in respect to the next generation,
yep.
right? Yeah.
But
Yeah.
what a lot of these magazines, like 17 and Cosmo, and all these different magazines that have been marketed to women for, since the 1960s,
Mm-hmm.
what those magazines have argued to women is that, it's argued postmodernism to women.
Mm-hmm.
What it has said is the only thing that is real is power.
Mm-hmm.
And the fact that the fact that your husband goes out and works 50 or 60 hours a week, or whatever, and then brings home the bacon for you,
Mm-hmm.
and you're at home, you're at home doing your thing.
Mm-hmm.
um he's the one that has the power.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So what you need to strive to do is you need to go out and do exactly what he's doing, or
Mm-hmm.
you need to step into his shoes and replace him.
Right.
And the whole argument is that men are ultimately replaceable.
Right.
Now a really interesting thing, there's a woman, I saw an interview that she gave.
Mm-hmm.
She's a former writer for Cosmopolitan magazine.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
And what she explained was that that there were like two or three criteria that they would use whenever they were writing articles. And remember, so there was the term in the 70s and 80s and 90s called the Cosmo girl, you
Okay.
know.
Mm-hmm.
And what the Cosmo girl was a girl that was, going out and living her best life,
Okay.
having uh intercourse without any strings attached,
Mm-hmm.
had a high paying career, high power career,
Right.
and lived on her own, and basically lived the way that Hollywood would say bachelors ought to live.
Okay.
You know,
Okay.
and so with this woman who worked as a writer, for Cosmo magazine for like 30 years,
Mm-hmm.
said that they would make those stories up,
Mm-hmm.
one,
Mm-hmm.
and two, another very important thing is some of the biggest advertisers in Cosmo magazine were companies that sold contraception.
Okay.
So
Okay.
so so they would write articles and embed advertisements for contraception in it.
Mm-hmm.
And they would write the article in such a way that a woman reading it would never know that the article was advertising contraception.
Right.
You know,
Right. And so it's an
Um,
implicit, sort of implicit bias, trying to get her to think about these things kind of like unconsciously.
yes, and it's really interesting because what she was instructed to do
Mhm,
was write basically make up a story about a woman that has a high paying job that's having lots of intercourse with a lot of men,
mhm.
utilizing contraception. She lives in a city, kind of like Mary. I guess like a raunchy version of Mary Tyler Moore,
Okay.
of Mary Tyler Moore or something like that.
Mhm,
And what the magazine would claim is that these were write ups about actual women, about real women,
mhm.
but they weren't. the
Right.
these write-ups were written about women that were completely fictional,
Mhm,
but the magazine, Cosmo magazine, said that these women were real. Now I'm sure that there were articles that were written about real women,
mhm,
here and there, but what they were trying to do was take the exception to the rule,
mhm,
which are women that are living like which are living like the way that Hollywood says the bachelors ought to live,
mhm,
um and trying to make that into the norm.
mhm.
And so one question I'd have is, from the perspective of a Girardian, what do you think about that? Do you think that's brilliant propaganda?
Yes, I mean, yeah, it is brilliant propaganda, and I also think it's you know, it's obviously mimetic, you know, but but I think from a Girardian perspective, to go back to your the whole idea of what you were talking about in the sense of a woman who governs the uh, economy of the home, right? The economy of the
Mm-hmm.
hearth, right?
Yep.
Um, and that being seen as, um, I guess, less of lesser value. So it what happens is that there's this encouragement of women to be just like men. Well, what does that create? It creates rivalry. You know what I mean? They say, well, in order for us to be equal, right? Equal, then we have to be like men. We have to do the exact same jobs as men because that's really where the power lies, right? That
Yeah.
a woman who takes care of her home, who cooks, who raises the children and instructs them and guides them and are giving them important values and everything is sort of a that's like that's what men imposed on women, right? Not that it's what
The natural order of
yeah,
things.
the natural order of things,
Right.
or the coming from God, right? And so I think that's where the Girardian sort of play comes in, is that they become rivals to one another, that the man and woman have become rivals to one another, and that actually goes back to, I think, the whole thing of from a Christian perspective, and I think this is something that really has been debated a lot. I think in a lot of Christian circles, and that's the whole um, uh, the scripture. I forget which epistle it is, but when Paul says, um, wives obey your husbands, you know, um, women, submit to your husbands, right? And
Yes.
they find that to be a lot of women find that to be very um, controversial. They find it to be sort of um, like another case of this is a man who's telling women to be subservient to a male, right? To a man, and so they don't look at it like, no, this is actually God, who is instructing, you know, uh, Paul to preach this message, you know, and two, I think I think another thing is, especially with people who read that scripture, they intentionally, I think they intentionally do this, bro. They intentionally leave out what Paul says to men, right? What Paul says to husbands, and that is, husbands, lay down, be kind to your wives, like long suffering with them, and be willing to lay your life down for them as
Like
Christ.
Christ for the church,
Right,
right?
right. Now, here's the thing. I think what they intentionally leave that out because they don't want to admit that a man being willing to lay his life down for his wife and his family is so much. There's so much. That is a heavy. That is a heavy command. That is a heavy command, right? Because you're telling the man that his life, his life can be gone
Mm-hmm.
for the sake of his love for his wife. That's a powerful thing. That's an extremely powerful thing. And I think it's like not giving that credit or not giving that as much weight as the irritation by a lot of the feminist women who have a problem with women submitting to their husbands. You know, you know, a woman is not being told to sacrifice her life. You know what I mean? She's being told to submit to her husband, not only because that's what God says, but I think there's actually like economic and anthropological implications for that, right? You know, if you think about the fact that we're talking about prehistory, it was vital for a man to protect his wife and to protect and for men to protect the women in their communities. Why? Because in a society that, see, we don't think about, like, we're able to do all these all this stuff. We're on the internet. We have lights. We have, if we want to turn on the heater, all I gotta do is turn it on or tell Siri, turn the heat on to 70.
Yeah.
Turn, turning the heat on to 70. You know what I'm saying? Like, you have all that now. You can drive.
Sending
You can
message to Jeff Bezos.
Yes, all right. You could get in a car and go, and in some cases, you can get in a car and go, and nobody's driving. It's a self-driving car, right? But we need to think about this, I think, in a way in which we remember that society was not always like that, right?
Right.
Communities were not always like that. And there were no laws. There were no laws to protect women from the ability for a man or other men to dominate physically over a woman.
Right.
Okay. So you needed men to to protect women who were pregnant, rearing children, and living in a community together from the possibility of other men or wild animals, right? Attacking you and destroying your family or community.
Well, and also too, in a lot of cases, in especially in Roman Greece,
Mm-hmm.
if you were a woman who was born into unfortunate circumstances, you were abandoned by your family, maybe your parents died, maybe one of your parents died, whatever
Mm-hmm.
happened,
Mm-hmm.
and you grew up on the streets,
Mm-hmm.
that happened to a lot of people in Rome. Actually,
Mm-hmm.
in Rome and Greece,
Mm-hmm.
marriage was not the norm. you
Okay.
know
Okay.
we have this Christian bias
Mm-hmm.
where we look back at where we look back 100 years, 1,000 years, 2,000, 3,000 years, whatever, we try
Mm-hmm.
to impose our set of values and the way that things are now. We try to
Mm-hmm.
impose that on the way we try to impose that on that time period back then. But that's
Mm-hmm.
that, and the ironic thing is the people that do it, that the people that are the most guilty of it are the postmodernists.
Right,
You
right,
know, and what
right,
those people are saying that what we should do is eliminate all of our values right now and just try to live like animals or whatever, you know. But
right.
then they want to go back in history and impose the same values that they're at war with today,
Mm-hmm.
the same Christian values. They want to impose those on the past.
Right,
That's insane. But
right.
so there were a lot of young girls and young boys in Rome and Greece
Mm-hmm.
that aspired to a life of being a servant or a life of being a slave.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so the thing is, for them, they would look up at the slaves and servants of moderately well-to-do Roman families or Greek families or whatever,
Mm-hmm.
and would say, wow, someday that's what I want to do. I
Right,
want to figure out how to do that,
right,
you know.
right, right.
And you know, it wasn't, you know, you already had Aristotle talking about the idea that the ultimate calling, you know, the whole idea that would eventually become like vocations and callings and everything in Christian parlance, which we've kind of done away with today.
Mm-hmm.
But it's the notion that whatever lot in life you find yourself as an adult,
Mm-hmm.
you're first and foremost called to be a mother, or to be a mother or a father,
Right,
you know.
right.
And that is what it means to be a civilized adult. You
Mm-hmm.
know, it
Mm-hmm.
is to be a mother or father.
Right.
We have a lot of adults walking around that are not, um that are biologically adults,
Mm-hmm.
but mentally they don't have the capacity to be mothers or fathers,
Right, right.
which is being able to sacrifice oneself for others
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
in love, to will the good of the other. And that looks different for men than it does for women, and
Right,
it's equally beautiful and equally
right,
meritorious and equally important in both cases,
right,
you know.
right.
But what I'd like to do is I've got Genesis chapter 3 pulled up,
Okay.
and I'd like to read real fast the curses on the woman and Adam.
Yes.
And
Okay.
I think that kind of ties into a lot of what we're talking about here.
Yes.
Um,
Okay.
so this is after the serpent had tempted Eve,
Mm-hmm.
and then Eve fed the apple to Adam,
Mm-hmm.
and and then God came into the garden, and Adam and Eve realized that they were naked, and they put the leaves over themselves,
Right.
and and then he lays the curse upon this. Here, I'll read the serpent one. This is
Okay.
Genesis chapter 4, or chapter 3 verse 14, and then I'll do 16, which is the curse on the woman,
Okay.
17 on Adam.
Okay.
So the Lord said to the serpent, because you have done this, cursed are you above all livestock and above all beasts of the field.
Mm-hmm.
On your belly you shall go, and dust you shall eat all the days of your life. I will put enmity between you and the woman, and between your offspring and her offspring. He shall crush, or he shall bruise your head, and you shall bruise his heel.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the curse on the serpent. And
Mm-hmm.
notice that doesn't reference the man, that doesn't reference Adam, that references the woman, right?
Right. 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 Right.
And then to the woman he said, I will surely multiply your pain and childbearing. In pain you shall bring forth children. Your desire shall be contrary to your husband,
Mm-hmm.
but he shall rule over you. And then verses 17 through 19, which is the curse on Adam, which he gets a pretty lengthy
A good
curse.
dose. Yeah.
Yeah. Um,
Yeah.
because you have listened to the voice of your wife and have eaten of the tree of which I commanded you, you shall not eat of it. Cursed is the ground because of you. In pain you shall eat. In pain you shall eat of it all the days of your life. Thorns and thistles it shall bring forth to you, and you shall eat the plants of the field. By the sweat of your face you shall eat bread till you return to the ground, here, sorry. By the sweat of your face you shall eat bread till you return to the ground, for out of it you were taken, for
Mm-hmm.
you are dust, and to dust you shall return.
Mm-hmm.
So basically what the man's curse is that he's going to have to go and toil and work and
Yep.
sweat, you know.
Labor. Labor.
But no, but notice here, I mean,
Yeah.
and now I'm gonna ring a little alarm here because this is something that's a little bit controversial,
It's okay. It's all right,
but
brother. Yeah.
it's borne out by science, and it's borne out by observational data too, which is that men are physically stronger than women. That's that's a simple fact. Now the thing is, if this were I don't know, if this were the year 2000, I don't really think that would be a controversial thing to say,
Right. Right.
but that's a very, very controversial thing to say today, you know.
Yeah.
So notice that the thing is, I mean, even in God's curse, he is
Mm-hmm.
merciful, because I mean, I'll tell you what a brutal curse would be, is
Mm-hmm.
if the curse were put on the woman to have to go and toil
Right.
and be the one who's brunting the hard labor outside, because
Mm-hmm.
that that would not only be a curse, that would be unnatural and unjust,
Right.
and you know, God is not unjust.
Right. Right.
um Now, one thing that I think is interesting though is back to the curse against the serpent. I will put enmity between you and the woman, and between your offspring and her offspring.
Mm-hmm.
He shall bruise your head, and you shall bruise his heel. um you know, I mean, arguably that's sowing the defeat of the serpent,
Mm-hmm.
who we know is Satan.
Mm-hmm.
and 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 that's, you know, the defeat, which is Jesus Christ,
Mm-hmm.
does not come out of the loins of a man.
Right.
You
Right.
know, it bursts forth. You know, he bursts forth from a woman,
Right.
the
Right.
perfect woman, the
Yes.
best woman, the greatest woman.
Yes. Amen. Yeah.
You know,
And yeah. Yeah.
and it is also interesting to note in Genesis that Eve is not given the name Eve
Mm-hmm.
until after those curses, because
Mm-hmm.
prior to that she's known as woman,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
which is what Jesus calls the Blessed Mother in the Gospels. Well, you know
Right.
I've heard people preach sermons before which have been wrong,
Yeah.
preach sermons before where they've said that Jesus was disrespectfully calling his mother woman,
Yeah.
because in the English language, calling her woman would be disrespectful,
Mm-hmm.
but he's actually using the same word that Eve would have been referred to prior to the curse, because
Mm-hmm.
prior to that she's called woman, she's not called
Right.
Eve.
Right. Right.
and
Right.
and one thing I want to tie all this together is that when Adam and Eve were kicked out of the garden
Mm-hmm.
and the curses were bestowed upon them, Adam and Eve still in their fallen state, they still understood, you know, how they had a broken identity, but they still had an identity nonetheless.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like a you know, prior to the fall, their identity was like a perfect piece of glass,
Mm-hmm.
and now it's a shattered piece of glass, but it's still all together. You know,
Right.
it's just like deformed or whatever.
Right.
And Adam and Eve would have passed on whatever traditions and information and customs they had that came from the garden
Right.
to their children,
Right.
you know, saying that this is who you are and this is how you're meant to live.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that anthropologically speaking, when you go around the world and you look at different cultures, you'll see that the Europeans will emphasize certain things, Africans will emphasize certain things,
Mm-hmm.
people in the Far East will emphasize certain things, Semitic people will emphasize certain things, you
Mm-hmm.
know, like the Native Americans would emphasize certain things.
Mm-hmm.
But the thing is, there are wrong things in the customs and traditions that have been handed down within those cultures, but
Yes.
there's also truth that goes all the way back to the garden,
Yes.
that was handed down to our original parents that there
Right.
were representatives in the garden that really screwed everything up.
Right. Right.
You
And
know,
that's, yeah, that's an important, I think that's an important thing to think about. Like when you're talking about the male and female dynamic that's going on right now with this whole thing of rivalry and I mean, I've even heard some women talk about these things as like for men to lead is unnatural. It's not the state of it's not the true state of nature and things of that nature. The thing that I think is missing in a lot of these conversations or these debates or downright arguments is they do leave out the sort of spiritual and Christian dynamic there of the fall of man, right? And two, that we don't take into account that Christianity has a very different perspective on male and female relationships than the other two Abrahamic religions, that's Judaism and Islam.
yeah.
See, Christianity, when I don't know if it was the Sadducees or the Pharisees or one of the C's said uh, something. They asked Jesus, should a man, you know, when he something about marriage, right?
Mm-hmm.
And Jesus, his answer, he said, um, in the beginning, it wasn't it wasn't that way, right?
Right.
That a man did not have multiple wives, but that a man was it was a pair. It was a man and a woman together. They became one flesh. He said when a man leaves his home, he leaves his mother and father. He clings to his wife, and they become one flesh. So I think Christ is imposing. Not imposing. Let me get the right word. Christ is interjecting there, and he's saying men have a duty to to be married and in a relationship with one woman, okay, and that a woman has a duty to be in a relationship with one man, and that they become one flesh. And I think so much of what plays out in a lot of these debates is that, like, because men can have multiple relationships with women and say not get pregnant, or
Mm-hmm.
as a man, in order for a woman to respect you, you have to have multiple relationships, you know, in order to keep her in her place or something like that. I think that's wrong to 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 um to be instructing young men to do that. To instruct them to live that sort of lifestyle. It's destructive, and I think because of that, what happens is women get on social media and get out to the world, and they lambast men for that behavior, and they say this is why we don't want to follow you, because you're not living up to your you know the command of a husband, the command of a man, to control your libido, to control your masculinity. You understand? To control your behaviors. And so I think because of that like that whole thing, that whole Christian dynamic is missing, you know, and they want to go off into talking about, these other cultures and these other faiths, how, you know, how tribal society, the man had more than one wife and he had a harem and all this type of stuff. And they want to use, like, well, it's just natural biology. It's just like when you look at history, and we were doing that too. We talked about prehistory and history and civilization, right? And how like no society that has been matriarchal has survived. Now that's just a truism. That's just a fact, right? But it's also it's also a fact that man is in a fallen state, right? And because of that, um, we have these. I suppose we've had these proclivities to do what is wrong, right? And it's not to say that to say that men are the head of their house, to say that men are um, supposed to be the breadwinner, to say that men are supposed to protect their wives and their wife and their children is not it's not wrong to say that, you know. And I think even more that is a that is a heavy task, you know, um, for a man to have to live up to that, right? Because
Yeah.
men have eyes, you know what I'm saying? We can become very, very uh influenced.
Well, and the problem, and that's the problem with postmodernism.
Right.
And the thing is, people that are very, very proud, avid postmodernists,
Mm-hmm.
it's funny how much they hate Andrew Tate.
Mm.
But Andrew Tate is as postmodern as you can get, because what Andrew Tate says is that the stronger have a responsibility to subjugate the weaker
Mm.
for the sake of the stronger and for the sake of the weaker.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Because what Andrew Tate says is that is the only thing that's real in the world.
Mm-hmm.
There's this old Christian concept of love,
Mm-hmm.
willing the good of the other and everything. That's all a bunch of foo-foo.
Mm-hmm.
The only thing that's actually real is
Mm-hmm.
power
Mm-hmm.
and the exercise of power.
Right.
It's just so funny how postmodernity, that's what postmodernity says.
Mm-hmm.
But when people like Andrew Tate say that, they say, oh, no, that's evil,
Right.
that's him being authoritarian. you
Right.
know but the thing is, all that he's doing is he's an embodiment
Yeah.
of their philosophy, like the most real embodiment,
Right.
um in a masculine form
Right.
of their ideal, but
Right.
for whatever reason they reject it.
Right. Because they I think what they don't like is the fact that he's just projecting exactly what it is that they advocate for. The whole postmodern idea of power is what really matters. Well, if power is what really matters, the man is stronger, right, than than the woman. The man does not have to be does not have to like physically be tied down to, you know, uh, being pregnant for 9 months. You know what I mean? So they're and it's not just like, oh well, that's an economic thing that was put in place to dominate women. No, that's
That
true. I mean, what?
that's just exercising power, right?
Yeah, yeah,
And what
right.
and the thing is, why are they going to want to bring in values?
Mm-hmm.
They're going to borrow values from Christianity
Mm-hmm.
that they argue is a fundamentally oppressive system.
Mm-hmm.
Because all it does is just masks over the
Mm-hmm.
exercise of power, which is the only real thing. And then
Mm-hmm.
when somebody like Andrew Tate agrees with them
Mm-hmm.
and says, I'm going to do that,
Mm-hmm.
then they call a foul.
Right. Right.
It's completely
Right.
insane.
Right.
I think it's really important to distinguish between the Christian view of the soul and body
Mm-hmm.
and the non-Christian view of the soul and body.
Mm-hmm.
Because and when I say the Christian view of the soul and body, it's the notion that there really is no difference. To be
Right.
human is for your soul and body to be one entity.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That's why the resurrection's so important.
Right.
Like you
Right.
you are less human
Mhm.
when your soul is separated from your body.
Right.
That's only a temporary thing. Like that's not supposed to that's unnatural. It's not supposed to
Right.
be.
Right.
Um and
Yep.
so the thing is, that's a very, very hard thing for people to understand, because I think in the West we have a tendency to think of the body as being like a car and the soul
Mhm.
as being like the driver.
Right.
And the
Right. Right.
driver is the most important part of the car,
Yeah.
because without the driver, the car doesn't drive.
Right.
And the driver can actually, the cars are interchangeable.
Right.
The driver, the person driving the car, they can get out of that car and go drive a truck,
Right.
or they can go drive a golf cart, they can go drive whatever they want.
Yeah.
Well, that's not the way it works.
Right.
In the Christian understanding of the soul and body, which is that it's all integrated in one.
Right.
You know,
Right.
that's the reason that Jesus still has the wounds that
Yeah.
that 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 uh that were given to him on the cross
Right.
in heaven. But in heaven, those things are viewed as trophies. you
Right.
know
Right.
you know
Right.
it's just like the saints that were beheaded are probably still beheaded in heaven, but
Right.
but
For,
it but it's a totally different view.
yeah.
And
Yeah.
now that's not a like a that's not a definitive thing, but
Yeah. Yeah.
but
Yeah. I mean, the picture.
that's a very probable thing. And there are a lot of saints, and there's a lot of church tradition that has taught that.
Right. Right. Yeah. Yeah. Surely the image of that is sort of kind of like,
Yeah, but
yeah.
I think that all gets back to thinking about the difference between those two worlds. And unfortunately, a lot of Christians do not have a traditionally Christian view of the soul and the body.
Hmm. Hmm.
They
Yeah.
have a very, very pagan view of it, that
Right.
that the body's interchangeable,
Hmm.
and that the soul is the only thing that's real.
Right.
You know,
Right. Yeah.
and
Yeah.
and,
Yeah.
uh, and I think I think that's a result of, it's really like a Gnosticism,
Hmm.
where, and honestly, I think that's really the core to understanding the this movement of supporting genital mutilation of
Hmm.
children,
Hmm.
and,
Hmm.
and adults too,
Hmm.
which is the idea that the only thing that's real is how you feel.
Hmm.
And that your soul is, because your soul is gender neutral,
Hmm.
then you must impose that gender neutrality from your soul, which is the real thing,
Hmm.
onto your body in order to make your body more real.
Hmm. Hmm.
But
Hmm.
then people quickly realize that that's not the way it works.
Right. Right.
Your soul is integrated with your body,
Hmm.
and your body is integrated with your soul.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. And I think that that's I think the reason for that is probably because um, specifically here in America, right? Um, that maybe and hey, some people might say, man, you getting on the Protestants too hard, but I think that's where I think that's where it comes from. I think that's where it actually lies because when you think about
At the very
Protestantism,
least, German philosophy, man.
yeah,
At the very least.
yeah. I mean, when you think about it, it's like the whole this sort of separation of the body and the soul, and that the soul will carry on. The soul, is the thing that matters most. And that saving the soul is the most important thing. I think that comes. I can't prove that, like, but there is a sense in me that thinks that it does come out of like Protestantism, or you know, and I don't know what denomination. I can't say which denomination. It could be all of them. Calvinism, Lutheranism, Methodism, Episcopalianism, like so, all of those groups. But I do think that's where it comes from. The other thing though that I wanted to point out, just before we close here, is the fact that all of these things, whether it be feminism, whether it be, like having a non-traditional sense of the family, uh, you know, transgenderism, LGBTQ, is the fact that the West is imposing that, or trying to impose that on uh, the rest of the world,
Right.
specifically Africa and like South America, right? And we've seen like an uproar about this, or sort of a rebuke or a push uh, back by Catholic bishops in Africa who are
God bless them.
yeah, right, who are who
Yeah.
are who are who are who are who are against the Pope's bless talk blessing of homosexual marriages.
Yeah.
you know they are against that, right? And I think, and we talked about this before. uh
Well, at the very least, it's the notion of blessing couples
right,
because it can sow confusion.
right, right.
You know.
Yeah, and we talked about this, I think, before, when we talked about we had talked about the book that we had reviewed, um
Oh
about
man. Uh,
you remember what, yeah.
I think the book was called Dead. Was it called Dead Aid?
No, but it was
That.
what was it called?
Oh no, no, it was and I'm not even
Something.
going to try to pronounce her name.
Yeah, 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 yeah. Something Africa. I forgot.
Yeah.
Um,
Oh, yeah, something. Yeah.
yeah, but you know what I'm talking about. So,
Yep.
it's like what you're seeing is this, you know, this sort of uh imposing of these certain, so much concern for the rights of or the privileges of the LGBT community in Africa, right? Transgenderism in Africa, and even going us as so far as to threaten, these African nations with, like, oh, we're not, unless you do this,
Yeah.
unless you enact these policies, like, we're not gonna give you funding, we're not gonna help you, you know, uh, we're gonna hold your debt over you, you
Hmm.
know, and all of that. And the thing is that it's like, you know, it makes you wonder, is that not a form of um, colonialism,
It's the
right?
most real form of
Ideological.
colonialism on the planet today.
Yeah, right, right,
I
right,
mean,
right, right. And so, and here's the other thing. If because it's see it this is just kind of like my own perspective here. It seems to me that the LGBTQ and the transgender movement actually grew out of feminism. Now, I don't know that to be true, but I wouldn't say grew out of it, but almost like it became like that was the catalyst for that. You know
well,
what I mean?
I think a major part of it was separating because really, I think when you get down to the core of a lot of this stuff,
Hmm.
you're dealing with identity, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
Like, uh, in the garden after Adam and Eve sinned,
Hmm.
they forgot who they were, right? Like
Hmm.
they lost their identity, and
Hmm.
we're still reeling from that today.
Hmm.
You
Hmm.
know, and when you're dealing with feminism, when you're dealing with the whole alphabet, you know, and nothing against any of those people,
Hmm. Hmm.
um, but the problem is what you're dealing with is a loss in identity of a framework for perceiving the world that says that the body and soul
Mm-hmm.
are separate. The soul is what's real,
Mm-hmm.
and the body is what's really not real. So you have a very mechanistic view of the body.
Mm-hmm.
We view the body like we view a car.
Mm-hmm.
It's
Mm-hmm.
interchangeable. You can upgrade it, downgrade it, give it a tune up,
Mm-hmm.
change the tires, repaint it or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and unfortunately, that's the view that a lot of people have of the body.
Yeah. Yeah.
But
Yeah.
that's not grounded in what's real. That's not grounded
Right.
in reality.
Right. Right. But isn't
Because
it,
the
you know,
body you have is the body you're going to have for eternity.
right. Right. And and it's funny that when you think about this, right? Uh uh I don't know, I don't know how it is for like other communities, but like there's been a lot of backlash by like black women, and this is probably true for some white women too, that they I know it's true. In fact I know it's true that they are starting to have a lot of push they're pushing back on uh transgender men calling themselves women, and on top of that labeling women as cis women, or like
Mm-hmm.
you know what I'm saying, like as a like that a woman is just another category of woman, right? There are other categories of women, right?
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of women are starting to say no, no, we didn't we were cool, we as women were the ones that were supporting you in wanting to have all these sex changes and be a woman. But now you're going a little too far, right? In trying to impose your definition on what a woman is when you weren't born as one. You see what I'm saying? That's the snake eating his own, though. I would say that.
So I have a thought, and
Mm-hmm.
I haven't really fleshed it out, but
Mm-hmm.
let's go with it. I think I'm kind of wondering if the whole if the trans movement
Mm-hmm.
originated, and really that entire framework of you are a soul.
Mm-hmm.
That's the real part about you, and
Mm-hmm.
your body is the part of you that is not real, that's
Mm-hmm.
interchangeable, that you can manipulate and everything, and that's
Yeah.
perfectly fine
Mm-hmm.
as a a a reaction to racism.
Mm-hmm.
Because remember, America is steeped in that British colonial you, you know
Yeah.
racism. Yeah,
Right.
like the you know you know racism goes all the way back to the very beginning with humans.
Right.
They'll they'll identify us versus them, but how they identify us versus them, it varies. So a
Mm-hmm.
lot of the time it's not even based on biological race, it's just based on tribe or whatever.
Yeah.
But particularly in the British realm,
Mm-hmm.
you can see a lot of systems that are based upon on biological difference and skin pigmentation. You
Mm-hmm.
see it in South Africa.
Mm-hmm.
You see it in you saw that in India. From what I think the caste system
Mm-hmm.
predated the Brits, but I'm sure that the
Yes.
Brits rolled in and made it their own.
Yeah.
And
Right.
and so and then you also had like the British were the first tier in the British area of Shanghai and in Hong
Mm-hmm.
Kong, and then
Mm-hmm.
the native people were second class citizen, or
Mm-hmm.
were actually like third class citizens, and then second class citizens were the people that were mixed,
Okay.
that had one British parent and one Chinese parent. So
Right.
the only reason I say all that is, and it was not lollipop fields and chocolate rivers and in other parts of the world, but I'm just saying that the British were the ones that really coined these terms, especially in our on our side of the world of white and black.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so in our in our cultural struggle to overcome that,
Mhm.
um, I think that people ended up maybe going a little bit too far
Mhm.
in reacting against something that was not that in reacting against something that was stupid,
Mhm.
racism that's not grounded in reality, right?
Mhm. Mhm.
It's based on a it's based upon a weird framework that's not grounded in reality.
Mhm.
In reacting to that, in trying to revolt against it and rebel against it and overturn it,
Mhm.
they went the complete opposite direction, saying not only are we overturning racism, but we're overturning the entire idea that biology matters at all.
Right. Right. Right.
You
Right.
know,
Right.
and then now you have the reaction to that,
Yeah.
which are like white nationalists and black nationalists and
Right.
all these other groups of people who are saying no, in fact biology is the only real thing in the world. Yeah, you know, and it's like, you know, and it's this big crazy cycle,
Yeah.
but the simple, but you know, the only real thing
Mhm.
is what you and I went back to at the beginning of this is Jesus Christ,
Right.
like that, because when we find our identity in him and in the church,
Mhm.
then that grounds us in the middle, you
Mhm.
know.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah.
Certainly, you know.
Yeah. And it's not, and here's the other thing. I think, and I'll just close with this. I think a lot of people think when Christians are talking this way, and they're when they're talking about a lot of these social dynamics that are going on, that they're trying to be over Christian. They're trying to be hyper Christian,
Yeah.
right? But I don't I don't think every Christian is doing that when they bring in Christ into this equation. I think what like just I can say for myself, it's like I don't see any other solution, to
I don't either.
deal with this dynamic. You know what I'm saying? It's like because you know people are making I mean, for whatever it's worth, there are people who are making a living off of this art, off of this debate. Okay, I mean, and making a good
Yeah.
living off of this debate. Okay, and that's not, hey, more power to you. That's how you getting your money, right? But I'm just saying that I think maybe there is a there is a there's a willingness and a sort of purposeful intent to leave out the Christian message in that, because it doesn't serve um, the the kind of rivalry or the the debate. It doesn't serve the debate.
Mhm.
You know what I'm saying? Because it stops that, right? If
Yep.
women if women truly admit and subscribe to the teachings within the gospels, and men do the same, that whole thing becomes obsolete. And I think that um there's either an intent to sort of criticize Christianity, right, as being the white
Mhm.
man's religion, or Eurocentric, or it came from Jesus. Jesus was a white man, and therefore, you know what I mean, or that Jesus was not a white man. He was a black man. You know what I'm saying? So
And you know, the fascinating thing to me is that more than likely he was somewhere in the middle. You go and look at the complexion of
yeah,
the average Palestinian,
right.
of the average Palestinian, and that can be an Arab Christian or a Jew. Yeah,
Mhm,
it doesn't matter. But you go and look at the average complexion over there, and they're
mhm.
somewhere in between you and me. You know,
Right,
like they're
right, right.
and
And
I think that's really interesting.
yeah, but again, I think the fact that those are debates And the fact that those are things that have continued to sort of uh, create interest among people. One, okay, human beings like drama, and I've said this many times.
Oh, they
Human
love it.
beings love drama. We love to be entertained by, you know, whether it's a man and a woman arguing with each other about who's wrong and who's right, whether it's a black man and a white man arguing about who's right, whether it's a black man and a black man arguing about who's right, right?
Yes.
We love to see drama, and we love to tune in to these discourses on social media. And I think that they just see, they see yes, the gospels are true, but it's not fun, it's not entertaining. That's I think that's the thing they have. It's like that ain't the Colosseum. You know what I'm saying?
Well,
It's not
well,
gladiators.
and that's the unfortunate thing is what's ingrained into all of us from the time we're like in preschool, kindergarten, whatever in America.
Mm-hmm.
I can't speak to any other country,
Mm-hmm.
but we're taught to identify ourselves as either being being white or black.
Right.
You know that is who you are. That's
Mm-hmm.
your identity.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I'm sorry, that's bullshit. That
Yeah.
that is not, you know, yeah, that can be an attribute of your body,
Mm-hmm.
but that's not your identity. That's not who you are,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
but the thing is, if if you don't know Christ,
Mm-hmm.
then then uh then that is your identity, and that's a pretty sad thing.
Right.
I mean, it really, it's a very, very pitiful thing.
Yeah.
And then on top of it, so I remember being a little kid, and my mom's side of the family are Cuban,
Mm-hmm.
and my dad's side of the family are Irish.
Mm-hmm.
Well, like, and and my dad's side, they made it to America because the British starved them.
Right.
During the mid 19th century, they had to come here, and then and yeah, well, that's a long story. But anyway, I remember whenever I would have to take a state test, I remember being in kindergarten and having to take my first test where I would have to bubble in,
Mm-hmm.
like bubble in the multiple choice answers.
Mm-hmm.
I remember the very beginning of that test, I had to select my race,
Mm-hmm.
and I remember there were two things for white on there. There was white parentheses non-Hispanic,
Right.
and then white parentheses Hispanic.
Right.
And I remember looking at that thing, and I raised my hand. I asked my teacher, "What am I supposed to do?" And my teacher said just put down what makes the most sense for you. So I bubbled in both.
Right.
Because the thing is, you know that was not how I was raised to self-identify.
Right. Right.
It didn't make, I mean,
Yeah.
if it had just said white, then I would have bubbled in white.
Right.
But the thing is, and now it's like I mean, that's a test in and of itself.
Yeah.
What do you identify as?
Yeah. Now you have to say other. You say
Yeah,
other.
yeah, and then and then they want for you to like fill to write it in and everything. But
Yeah.
I guess the only reason I point that out is that I mean, it's such an absurd way of categorizing yourself. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
let's say that that your mother was black and your dad is white,
Mm-hmm.
and we're talking about like in the early 90s.
Mm-hmm.
What would you have marked down there? Would you have
Yeah.
marked, I guess you would have marked black non-Hispanic,
Yeah.
so would you have said black non-Hispanic, black Hispanic, white non-Hispanic, white Hispanic?
Yeah.
That-
Well,
you know
now, if you're mixed, black and white, you better not put white because
yeah.
you, you better do what you better do. The best thing for you do is do a Colin Kaepernick.
Yeah.
That's your best bet, bro.
And that's the thing that gets me so mad is that, in the public school system, little kids they're being deprived of their real identity as children of God, you
Right,
know?
right.
And what they're being told is your identity is your biology.
Right, right. Yeah.
no, really not even your biology. Your identity is based upon the pigment of your skin color. Like
Yeah.
that, like, I mean, that is so, I mean, the thing is, if you didn't live here and you were to come here from another planet, you'd probably look at that and say that is nuts.
Mm-hmm.
If you look at the degrees of difference between the way that the different people live, like within the United States, if you look at people that are the children of the children of immigrants, you
Mm-hmm.
know people, it's just categorizing people based upon the complexion of their skin is just, I mean, it's not representative of who they are.
Right.
And what it does, it reinforces that bifurcation of the soul and body,
Right.
and
Yeah.
denigrating the body as being something that's not all that important.
Yeah.
And it starts from a very early age.
Right.
Excuse me.
And I think it's just like what you said, that also lends itself and opens the door um to other these extremes where like people
Mm-hmm.
want to be like like they want to be something other, not just about race, but like gender too. You know what I'm saying? Like you know, yeah, it's like it just opens up the door to these greater extremes, and that all goes, I think, back to sort of a privilege and being a victim, right? Like there's privilege in the 21st century of being a victim, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's 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 this privilege in being so extremely uh wanting to be a part of the ostracized group, or the group that is sort of on the margins, because 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 they're no longer on the margins. They are they become the center, right? They
Yeah.
become sort of the privileged class, right, so to speak. you know and I think what former generations can't understand is, why would anyone want to willingly be a victim?
Yeah.
You see what I'm saying? They can't understand. They can't understand that. You know what I'm saying? They say, well, why would you want to be? Why would you want that? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And and yeah, so I think that's really where that I think that lies. But you know,
And this is probably the most taboo topic that anybody can talk about.
mhm,
You
mhm,
know,
mhm, yeah,
and the reason people are, well, and real as a result of people not being able to talk about it, go ask your most radical white nationalist or your most radical black nationalists.
mhm,
uh you can go ask them, define white for me,
mhm, mhm,
define black for me,
mhm,
or give them a map of the world and
mhm.
say, I want for you to highlight all the white countries for me, or I want for you to highlight all the black countries for me.
Right,
You know what, that they're going to be very conflicted because they're
right,
not going to be able to do it.
right,
Because white and black, they're absurd concepts.
right,
Because
right,
there are white nationalists out there that will say that people from Mediterranean countries are not considered white.
right, right.
And then I know that there are black nationalists that are very particular
Yeah,
about 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 what part of Africa and then what countries in the Caribbean are actually considered black and which ones are not.
right.
But the thing is, these are people that are clinging to a totally false identity, and they're just trying to make it work.
Mhm, mhm,
But the thing is, I mean, it's absurd. It's a complete and total break with reality.
mhm.
And yeah,
Yeah.
I don't really know. The wildest thing are the people that will try to say that uh that that real white people are the only are only descended from the English.
Okay. I
You
wonder
know, I
what.
mean,
I wonder what the Germans and the Norwegians would have to say about that, or the Spanish.
Yeah. And you know, the thing is, like during the early 20th century, Italians were not considered white,
Right. That's
and
true.
and the Irish were not considered white. Like
Right.
when the British starved my ancestors out of Ireland and forced them to have to go to Canada and then come down to upstate New York,
Hmm.
nobody rolled out the red carpet for them.
Right.
In
Right.
fact,
Yeah.
I just found out that when they first arrived in the United States, they got drafted to go and fight in the Civil War.
Mm-hmm.
They didn't even know what was going on.
Yeah. Right.
You know, and they were immediately drafted and sent.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
You know, but yeah, yeah, white. I think white and black, that it's a false, it's a completely false identity,
Yeah.
and it needs to be repudiated, and the only way it can be repudiated is um through Jesus Christ and his church,
Right.
you know, and that's it.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, from male and female rivalry dynamic to the racial, you know,
Well, well, and
rivalry dynamic.
and what does the apostle Paul say, that there is no male, there is no female, there is no Jew or Greek,
Hmm. Hmm.
that we're all one in Christ Jesus, right? Like,
Yeah.
so the thing
Yeah.
is, we need to actually believe that.
Yeah. 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 Just don't tell the LGBTQ community that, because they'll use it against you.
And at that point, we can talk to them about proper context. Yeah.
Hey man, bro. Well, man, bro, it's really good talking to you, man.
Yeah, yeah, you too, man.
Let's do it again, brother.
All right,
Great
sounds
talking.
good.
All right. Ciao.